This news update is brought to you by
Hello, this is Greg Stissel with Austin County News Online, and today I'm joined with Dr. David Anderson, professor and extension economist with Texas A&M University, and he's going to explain some of the issues that are going on currently with COVID-19 and the beef shortage, as well as the price increase many of us are seeing at the grocery stores. Welcome, Dr. Anderson.
Hey, thanks for having me with you today.
Dr. Anderson, I guess we can start off with one of the first questions is, can you give us an overview of the issues of what's currently happening with this meat shortage?
Sure. Well, an overview, that's a pretty good question because this all starts right with coronavirus itself. We had really set up this year in terms of all livestock markets, beef, pork, and chicken. We were going to produce a record amount of meat this year. We produced all those animals for a record amount of meat, really driven by profitable times in the past and the planning process and producing more animals. And, with livestock, we're talking, biology too. So there's a time component to this. So we get to coronavirus hitting, restaurants shutting down, folks stampeding the grocery store, buying everything in sight, grocery stores trying to refill their pipeline, get their shelves back fully stocked. So that's really the first round effect. And then we hit coronavirus spreading through employees at packing plants, which really caused some plants to close, almost all plants to slow down their line speeds, to work slower, because they had to spread people out. Just like everywhere else is talking about social distancing, it's happening at plants too. And so if we think about it that way, we're really seeing the effects of that now in the marketplace. So, what do we see happening? Well, really, you think about a packing plant. A plant closes, and we're immediately thinking, okay, what are the economic impacts of that? Well, a packing plant buys live animals, and they sell meat. Well, when a plant closes or slows down, all of a sudden we've lost some demand for those live animals. When you lose demand for a product, price falls. And so if we think about why are cattle prices lower in all of this coronavirus mess, it's because we've lost some demand for the live animals from the packing plants. On the other end of the plant, meat's going out to those who are buying, restaurants, grocery stores, out to consumers. Yet, because of the plant slowing down, we've lost some supply of meat. So we've lost some demand for the live animals, we've lost supply of the meat, and the result is lower cattle prices to producers and higher prices at wholesale and at retail for consumers. So, people ask, well, how can we have lower prices for live animals but higher meat prices? And that's exactly what's happened. We've got this log jam, backlog, constriction at that point in the supply chain, and that's causing those problems. In fact, if we looked at the beef side, we got as low as, if we looked at daily fed cattle slaughter, we were down to 50,000 head per day, which was down over 40% from the same week the year before, and down over 40% from prior to coronavirus starting. So we were really, that's a pretty sharp change, and that was just 2 weeks ago. What we've seen in the meantime is the logjam starting to break up a little bit. We've got plants reopening. We've got companies figuring out, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to put these distancing, slower speeds into practice? And so we've actually got daily cattle movement picking up. we've got fed cattle prices coming up, and we've got wholesale meat prices beginning to decline a little bit as we loosen that log jam. So really, it's this whole continuum of the effects of coronavirus as it ripples through our whole economy. That's really what's going on.
Okay. Let me ask you, that brings up another question. I know I've seen read a lot of articles about how I don't know about cattle, but like your hog producers are slaughtering hogs by the thousands, and you hear about the carcasses being rotting, or they're being rendered as fertilizer and things like that. What is happening on that end that they are having to basically destroy their animals?
Yeah, this is you're right. We've seen these stories in the news, uh, and it's really a terrible outcome. What happens in uh, you know really modern big production systems is your sows are having little ones, and the little ones they come into the barn, the houses where they're going to be raised, and they move through. They've got all of this scheduled, and so the pigs are going to be full grown on this date. And if there's no place for those pigs to go, the next set of pigs are moving into that barn, that pen, right away because those other pigs are supposed to be gone. And what's happening is they're running out of room for them, and you can't just turn them loose. We see all over Texas the results of, and a lot of the rest of the U.S. too, the result of just pigs being turned loose. So really, they're left with this situation where there's no place for the pigs to go. They have no market for them to go to, and they don't have room for the next pigs that are already there because there was no place for the last pen to go. And so, what they're basically forced to do if there's no market for them, we've seen the cases of folks having to euthanize some of the pigs. And so that is going on. Luckily, that's a very rare occurrence. It takes some kind of huge event like this, really an unprecedented event for something like that to happen. There are a couple times in our history that has happened, but thankfully that's pretty rare.
Okay. What, in your opinion, what kind of changes do you think we can expect to see that the industry will undergo to try to mitigate where this doesn't happen again?
This we're really at the mercy of what do things like coronavirus do to us, as in terms of these rippling effects through our system. One of the things in modern meat packing, there are, research would tell us there are really huge economies of size, and by that meaning, the bigger I am, the lower my costs are. The lower per unit my costs are. And that leads to firms, companies expanding, getting bigger, building bigger plants. And so, in a way, what we have is a system of relatively few packing companies, but also relatively few very large packing plants, plants that process thousands of animals a day. And so our really market economics have led us to this configuration or this structure of the industry with relatively few really big plants. What coronavirus has reminded us or told us is that, if we're going to have relatively few really big plants, that may be the most economic efficiently, way to do things. Until we have an event like coronavirus. So, what coronavirus has reminded us is that, we can have an event like this that causes this constriction in our supply system, and which then causes these rippling effects of much higher prices to consumers, lower prices to producers, and it's really the risk we bear from this market-driven system that we have with these economies of size that lead us to fewer really big plants. So there are trade-offs, right? The trade-offs are we have a very efficient system with low costs, really low cost food to consumers. The trade-off is we have the risks of these bottlenecks that are subject to really fairly rare events like coronavirus or like events that take a plant out of production. So there's trade-offs, and right now we're seeing it, up close, uh, what the risk in the system is.
Okay. I know we've seen primarily, I've read about your biggest thing where the destruction of the animals is taking place is in chickens and hogs, and I assume that's because they have such a short growth period to them versus a cow. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a very short growth period, and also the way the industry is structured. You've got, they're in barns. They move to the next pen. It's a uh, very structured production process, and so the next pen of animals is coming, and that becomes the outcome in these rare circumstances, and it's pretty rare that things like this happen. That the what's happening in the marketplace would dictate this kind of drastic action on the part of some producers. So it's really that short, streamlined production system that makes it work like this.
Okay. Well, Dr. Anderson, do you have anything else that you'd like to let our viewers know? Any explanations or anything else?
No, I think that's pretty good. We seem to have covered a lot of ground in this little interview.
Yes, we did. And I sure do appreciate you coming on and explaining some of the things that are going on for us. And we hope to have you again for some other topics.
Hey, I hope so. I'm glad to be with you today, and let me know anytime.
Thank you. And stay tuned to Austin County News Online for more information on how COVID-19 is affecting Austin County and the state of Texas.